California's microstamping law was sold by supporters as a critical crime-fighting tool for police. But instead, so far, it has forced two major gun manufacturers, Ruger and Smith Wesson, to stop selling their semi-automatic handguns in the state. And to make matters worse, microstamping isn't only required on new firearms, but any gun that's already been on the shelf and has simply been redesigned. As you'll see in this report, from the CEO of Ruger, who I talked to members of law enforcement, and even an ex-con, they all see this law for what it really is, a de facto gun ban that only affects law-abiding citizens.
Here's an example of the ones that have already fallen off the list. They're the semi-automatic pistols, and these are very popular models. We can't sell these guns anymore, and they've used this little trick called microstamping.
It's just wrong. It's unethical. It has nothing to do with safety anymore. This is purely a political gun grab.
Police departments aren't banging down the door to go get this technology. Who is the politicians.
What's at stake is the loss of protection, self-protection, our freedoms to own and bear firearms in this country.
They don't give a rip. They don't care. It's another example of useless gun control legislation.
The microstamping law is not going to change nothing here in California. Not one thing. It's called politics. They're just wasting taxpayers' money. There's guns everywhere.
I'm here at the Ruger manufacturing facility in Prescott, Arizona, where its entire line of semi-automatic pistols is made. But not one of them will be headed for California because of the state's microstamping mandates.
We were actually forced out. So the first two big dominoes are falling, Ruger and Smith Wesson, but the others will be right behind us. In 2014, it doesn't work.
Lab is completely different from real-world application. What my study showed was that the idea is there, however, it's not ready for commercial or mass implementation. We need to look at this more before we start mandating this to be forced upon the law-abiding citizens.
The patent holder, didn't he come up with the same results?
Yeah, however, to him, if a legislature is willing to grab it and run with it, why not?
Microstamping, what is the technology all about?
The idea behind microstamping is to leave a mark in two places on the casing that can be translated back into the serial number of that gun, which would then allow the police to find out perhaps who the first person was who had the gun, but it won't tell them who the criminal is. So it really won't accomplish anything if you could get it to work, and we can't.
The legislation states that it has to be within two locations within the firearm, one being the firing pin. The second location, it does not specify. So now you have a second prong of this legislation that is a completely untested product.
The technology is ineffective. It really defeats itself.
We're trying to imprint who made it, its model name, and its serial number. This serial number information, 9 characters on a space, is right at the tip of that, right up there, in a shape that is about 1/16 of an inch.
The characters, we're talking the thickness of a human hair, or less, depending upon the firing pin.
What they're hoping for is that the firing pin will strike right here, nice, clean and center in the middle of the primer, and leave a nice little indentation. That's not typically what happens in a real firearm. You can see this one where the firing pin struck is now perfectly flat, and there's a little piece of raised metal there that's been sheared off. So any evidence of microstamping is now completely gone.
In some cases, especially with higher pressure ammo, the firing pin won't quite retract before the cartridge spins out. So if you look quite carefully here, you see a smear. So it ends up dragging.
So it won't be legible?
It won't be legible. And again, remember, it's not like you're putting this in a laboratory in a device that's going to just pull it back and imprint it once.
That's supposed to imprint every single time.
Right, without fail. Perfectly legible and can connect a fired case to a particular pistol that's going to be used presumably as evidence in court. So it has to be perfect all the time, every time. It's simply not possible. And it has to work with all ammunition.
And so by way of example, this is a typical brass cartridge. This is a nickel-plated cartridge. This is a steel cartridge. This one is an aluminum cartridge. And so each one of those obviously is a different hardness, a different surface, and would have a very different result if you tried to microstamp any of those.
I couldn't even begin to try to list the total number of ways you could defeat this technology.
Let me put it this way. The criminals, the lowlifes are smarter than Sacramento or Washington because a $2 file from the hardware store would get rid of it. Anybody could do it.
Something as simple as this, a piece of ordinary 300 grit sandpaper. I can take this firing pin, which does have micro-engraved markings on the tip, and within about 30 seconds of rubbing, no more than this right here, those marks will be gone. Put it back in the gun and it fired just fine.
Since I was younger, I always have a gun on me all the time. It's easy to beat the system, change the pin from a gun.
It's not uncommon when we get firearms in my profession to see criminals who have disassembled their firearms multiple times. So I go online, order myself a new firing pin, sit at home, switch up my firing pin, and voila, no more microstamping in my gun.
In addition to that, if I was going to commit a crime, I might go to the range, grab a handful of microstamped brass, and I leave that at the crime scene. Now the police have 10 or 15 different leads that they need to follow up on, and none of them are the criminal.
Exactly. So casings are found at the scene, no gun. Now, my life as a law-abiding citizen who was the unfortunate victim of a burglary and had my gun stolen is now part of a criminal investigation.
It's like creating a whole new class of criminals.
Absolutely. The ultimate person that's paying the price is the law-abiding gun owner.
So not only is the technology infeasible and impractical, but it really doesn't serve any purpose in terms of crime solving either.
The antis insist it's a vital tool for crime fighting.
This is effective technology, it's available technology, and when we know who bought the crime gun, that's a significant lead for law enforcement.
We don't prosecute the casing. We don't prosecute the gun. We have to find the person, and that's what's important for us. The microstamping is not proven technology and is not going to be the thing that makes or breaks a case.
Criminals very rarely go out and buy their own guns, so they are not the registered owner. So now you're increasing the distance between potential leads that this technology has the intended possibility to provide law enforcement.
A gun store is a joke.
$50 just to get a gun off the streets. It's cheap.
There is a lot of sharing of guns and borrowing, and you could rent one for a day for $20.
It's not a vital tool for crime fighting. It's a vital tool for gun control.
It is an all-out ban, yeah, on firearms that we've normally been able to sell.
Microstamping is an infringement upon the rights of law-abiding citizens. And so that's why I support the lawsuit from this CRPA and the NRA, because they are guarding against that incrementalism.
49 other states can buy these guns, but only California can. It's denying you your God-given rights to bear arms that are protected under the Second Amendment.
The politicians don't care about that. Politicians who have proven themselves to be anti-gun. They don't know the difference between a firearm and their shoe, as far as I'm concerned. Yet they're getting up there telling us what's best for us.
The antis like that. Long term, I hope it frankly comes to bite them in the rear end.